All right, so the supply of labor is driven by how much money does it take to get workers to do the job. That's really what the supply of labor is. And we can go through a similar argument where if the wage rate is $40 per day, how many people would be willing to work this job? And if the wage rate was $60 per day, how many people would be willing to work this job? I don't want to go through the same sort of an argument, but the idea here is that your supply curve will look like every other supply curve you have ever drawn. It looks like an upward sloping supply curve. All right? Now, the key is that the business is going to say, look, I'm only going to hire you if you make me money. And the suppliers are going to say, that's perfectly fine. I'm only going to work if you're going to be willing to pay me at least. All right? And what happens in the labor market is that there is an equilibrium wage rate that gets found. All right? And so let's assume that in this particular market, the wage rate is $75 per day for each worker. So at $75, how many people is this company going to hire? Why? Exactly. Once you get to that fourth person, you're losing money, and the business will say, sorry, number 4, you're out the door. All right? It would be nice if you could find a half a person, but let's not go through that road, though. All right, so the key here is realizing that supply and demand create the equilibrium wage rate. And that wage rate really dictates how much the business is going to hire people. All right? So in this given example that I've given you right here, suppose for some bizarre, weird reason, the price of the product went up to $15 per product. Now how many people would this company hire?
Well, they could hire all. No.
Well, let's see. Think about it, right? If the price was $15, what changes up here on our graph or our table? The MRP all changes, right? Because right now we're assuming the price is 10. So if the business is able to raise its price to $15 per item, what happens to the amount of money that all of their workers are earning for them? Increases, right? So what happens to the MRP for the first worker? 20 times 15? Or 300. 12 times 15? 180. 8 times 15? 120. 6 times 15? Remember, I'm a math teacher, guys, so I can do all of this. It's still decreasing, right? I mean, the numbers are still decreasing here. What's 4 times 15? $60. So if the wage rate stayed at $75, how many people is this company going to hire? 4 instead of 3, right? So the way we can reduce unemployment is just make prices go up. Duh. I mean, come on. If we could just get prices to go up, more people would get hired. All right? And this is why economists are looking at the inflation rate going, well, darn it, we need the prices to go up a little bit because higher prices will lead to higher employment.
So why don't they do that?
What happens when the price changes? The quantity demanded will go down, yes. No, demand does not go down. The quantity demanded will go down. So yes, people will buy less, but it doesn't matter. As long as the price is up there and the company is still recognizing that they're making profit, they're going to hire more people in order to produce more goods. All right. Now, it sounds like it's counterintuitive, right? Because, again, this is exactly what we all think. If the price goes up, what happens to demand? We all think in our heads, demand's going to fall. It's like, I will go into my, stab mode, and you don't like me there. The quantity demanded will fall, yes, but as long as demand is inelastic, remember that lowering the price and selling slightly less, the business is actually going to be happy. They're actually going to earn more profit. They don't mind too terribly much, and they'll still hire more people to work more and produce more. All right? It just means that they'll stockpile a little bit, maybe. All right? So, the idea behind some of our argument here is to point out that higher prices in the market would actually lead employment, right? Because then the marginal revenue product of everybody is higher. All right? So, generally, though, we don't tend to look at it that way because, yeah, when you do raise the price, the quantity that they're going to sell is going to go down. And when the quantity that they sell goes down, usually they're going to say, oops, now we're going to start having surplus. We're going to see buildups of goods, and then eventually they'll have to revert back to lowering their supply or lower their prices, one of the two. So the question then is, what do we as laborers want? I mean, what would you guys love in your jobs?
Equilibrium.
No, we hate equilibrium. You would love to have a raise, wouldn't you? I mean, so that's the key behind this, is what would give us a raise?
Actually have a job.
Well, you do. You got to have a job first, which we'll get to that a little bit. Right. Again, remember that the company has to make money in the deal, so whether or not they hire you is purely up to whether or not they're going to make money. So how do we get a higher wage rate? How can we get more wages?
Raise the price.
So one way is to potentially raise the price. But what we really want to do, right? What we really want to do is to have this equilibrium point move up here somewhere, right? Where the wage rate's going to be higher. So what do we need to do with the supply of labor or the demand of labor to guarantee that wages go up? So let's look at it from both perspectives, right? One perspective is from the demand side. In order for our wages to go up, what would have to happen to the demand for labor? It would have to shift to the right? Which means demand would have to increase. Right? Because if demand shifts to the right, that's what gives us a new equilibrium point. And yes, hey, look at that. Our wage rate is higher. So think right back to chapters 3 and 4. So an increase in the demand for labor will raise the wage rate. And what comes with that as a bonus? Higher wages and what else? So what's the other side of the graph? This is the wage rate. What's down here? Quantity. This is the quantity of what? Workers. So if we have a higher wage, what will we also have? We'll have less unemployment, right? So this is like the holy grail, right? Workers will get paid more and they'll get hired more. Wow! So all we really need to do is figure out how do we increase the demand of labor here in the United States. So potentially say, okay, look, let's stop rewarding outsourcing and start rewarding insourcing instead, right? So if the government starts somehow subsidizing companies bringing work back here, there would be a higher demand for U.S. labor, right? Whew. What happens? Wages go up, employment goes up. Excellent idea, right? Unfortunately, who gets screwed when companies have to do that? Well, the buyers a little bit because the price is going to go up, but who gets screwed first? The CEOs and the companies, right? And unfortunately, who holds most of the power in this country? Not the workers, and not the government either. The government has no power, folks.
Corporate America.
Corporate America has bought the political system at this stage, so Don't think the government has any power. The government has power over you, but not over a corporation. Very little. All right, so that's one way that we can go about somehow doing it, is increasing the demand for labor. But doing that is tough, right? This is hard. This is known to be hard. There's just very little that a government can do to try and affect that. I mean, if labor is cheaper elsewhere, that's where the business is going to go, right? So that would be nice. So from that perspective, we really can't do much, right? So how else, then, can we potentially raise the wage rate? We could say, well, let's look at it from the supply side. What do we need to have supply do in order to have a higher wage rate? Well, if it shifts to the right, where's our equilibrium point? We don't want that. We have to shift it the other way, right? If we shift it to the left, here's our equilibrium. Here's our higher wage rate. That's what we want. We want to get paid more. Right? Again, assuming you have a job. So we could, in this case, decrease supply. Of labor, yes. Because a decrease in the supply of labor would also lead to a higher wage rate. All right? Well, how can we decrease the supply of labor? Well, one way would be if we could, kill 20% of the workforce. But that's usually frowned upon. So how else can you reduce the supply of labor? Well, one way to do it is to unionize. Because what do unions do to the supply of labor? They restrict it. How do unions restrict labor? Yeah, right. So unions, the way they restrict labor, the first way they do it is they say they force union membership. If you have to be a union member to work at a particular company, if someone comes in who the union doesn't like, what can they do? They can say, nope, sorry, not fire them, they'll just never hire them, right? So you apply for the job and they say, oh, would you be willing to join our union? And you look at it and say, no, unions suck. And they say, oh, yeah, see ya. Right? What else do unions do? Well, they can say, well, there's an education requirement for this particular job. If you want to come be a carpenter here in the state of Wisconsin, you have to be a member of the carpenters union, and you have to have so many hours of education. You've passed the appropriate and done a certain amount of time being an apprentice, being the different apprenticeship programs before you become a master, right? Apprentice, journeyman, master, right? Again, if you want to be a standard full-paid union employee doing carpentry work, you have to spend that time being an apprentice. What does that do? That stops people from being construction workers, right? Or from being carpenters, or being plumbers, or being, an electrician. All of those things require all of this work before you become a full electrician or technician. For a union, yes. Because if you're going to do contract work here in the state, in this state, in order to be, licensed according to the state, you also have to be licensed according to the union that the state recognizes. Yeah. So when you do your own work on your house, you don't tell the state about it, right? Because if you do, they're going to say, wait, are you a full electrician? And you will say, what's that? And they'll say, therefore, no. And then when you try and go to sell your house, you have to divulge that you did electrical work on your house that was non-master-driven electrical work. And that will lower the value of your house. That's absolutely right. And you got to pay for all of that crap, and you got to get licenses for all that crap, and it costs a whole lot of money. And what it does is it reduces the supply of labor, right?
So, if you're a non-union, you own your own construction.
And you hire non-union workers?
No, if you own your own construction, you have to be a union.
No.
So how does that work? You have to be.
When you go to build, if you do go to do construction, if you go to do, say, carpentry work, if you do not hire master carpenters, you have to say, I am using apprentice carpenters, I'm using journeyman carpenters, or I'm using non-apprentice even carpenters. And then the work that you're doing, you will get paid that much less for it.
Substandard.
Yep, because it's considered quote-unquote substandard. And this is where, owning your own construction company, you start greasing the politicians so that you can say, oh, I had at least an apprentice working on this, regardless of whether that apprentice had a green card or not. And then again, that's another slippery road to fall down. But
There's a lot of slippery
right.
slopes. I
Right.
do remodeling, so I know all the slippery slopes.
All right. So again, is it good or bad? I don't know. I'm just letting you know the rules, right? And again, the idea behind this is higher wage rates, right? We need to get our people paid more so that people get paid more and can have a livable wage, right? So what else do unions do? They threaten to strike, right? So the two things that they do is that they threaten to strike and they collectively bargain, right? So, well, they used to be able to collectively bargain. Not so much anymore. Very true. So one of the things that they can do to restrict the labor or force the wage rate to be higher is to try and, threaten to strike so that they raise the wages, or collectively bargain to say we deserve more because we as a group of people have more power than any one individual does. And that makes sense. If you have 100 people together, that voice of 100 people is much louder than a voice of just one person. All right? Now, the problem with it is that what happens when you restrict the supply and you get a higher wage rate? What happens down here? I mean, here's how many people you hired before. If all of a sudden we raise the wage rate up here to $100 per day, what's the company going to do? They're going to start saying, oh, yeah, bye-bye. That's right. Right. So the unions are nice in that they get you higher wages, but they do also create unemployment. Okay? I mean, that's part of the game. So when people are talking about unions being bad, normally what they're saying is that unions cause unemployment, and they do. I mean, that's their job, partially. Now, what unions can also try to do, I mean, they have a better hand at attacking supply, right? So unions have a good control of the supply of labor. But what they really would like to be able to do is also have a hand on this, right? So what unions have been doing for the past 15 years has been forcing this, working on the other side of it, right? So one of the other things that they do, just so that you know and I don't miss it, let's go over here. They do something called feather bedding. Feather bedding is sounds like you're going to get a nice night's sleep, so it sounds good. And it is, if you think about it, but at the same time, it kind of maybe is not. What feather bedding is the 15-minute break or the 30-minute lunch. So imagine, if you will, you were an employee for GM or Ford or Chrysler, and you were working the line, because there's a big, huge line out there, and you're screwing on the tires for, a car. So you've got the lug nut and the hammer or in the wrench, and you're out there doing this all day, every day, hours straight, no breaks, none whatsoever. What's going to happen to your arm?
Rotator cuff surgery. Very good.
You're either going to get carpal tunnel, you're going to have shoulder problems, you're going to have elbow problems, you're going to have health problems. So what did the unions tell the Ford, GM, and Chrysler guys that this was doing to their workers? It was causing higher insurance claims. It's costing you money. But if you would stop every hour and 45 minutes and give them a 15-minute break, they could go out, stretch their arm, do some light calisthenics so that arm isn't worked continually straight 8 hours. And when they come back, they'll be able to go back. They won't have to have as many injuries. You won't have as many insurance claims. It'll be saving you money, right? But, so the workforce now, instead of working 8 straight hours, what do? They work for an hour and 45 minutes, and then they took a 15-minute break. Now, back in the 50s, what was that 15-minute break called? It was a smoke break. That was what they called it. It was the smoke break. So if you got 15 minutes to go out and smoke your cigarette, come back and go back to work, right? So then you'd put in another hour and 45 minutes. You'd go and get your 30-minute lunch. Details back then, right? You get your 30-minute lunch. Again, you come back, you work for an hour 45 minutes, you get your 15-minute smoke break again, put in your last hour and 45, and you're good to go. So you did 4 1 hour and 45-minute sessions of work. How many hours did you work?
6 hours.
7. The other 6. How many hours did you get paid, though? 8. You worked 7, you got paid for 8. What happened to your wage rate? If you $20 a day and you worked for 8 hours, how much would you paid per hour? $15. If you only worked 7 hours and were paid $120 for that day, what was your wage rate? Now you're looking at $17, $18 an hour, much better than the 15, right? So feather bedding is actually what forces there to be a higher wage rate, just because you're going to get paid for sometimes doing nothing, right? Or resting, so that you are not forcing an insurance claim to happen sooner, right? So what everyone in the last few years has been saying is that, again, making them be inefficient, paying them for sitting around and doing nothing. Yes, they are. But if they work straight for 8 hours, if I had to talk for 8 straight hours, what's going to happen to me eventually?
In 4 or 5 days, you won't be talking.
Yeah, my voice will be gone. So I need to have that time off. These workers need to have that time off. But if you're from the business side of it, what are you saying? I'm paying you to do nothing. You're inefficient. Which one is it?
Well, surprisingly, unions aren't the only ones that the companies started to realize that there's restorative factors to people taking a break. Because there's no law that says you deserve a break or a lunch break.
Right. Mm-hmm.
There is not a state or federal law.
Nope.
They can work you 10 hours straight on the line, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Very true.
They don't have to pay you for it.
They don't have to pay you for it. No, it's not in the law.
Not if you're over the 2 hours.
It's not in the law.
Yeah, the new state law states that if you work 2 hours in a given day, you have to get paid for 8. That's the new state law. If you work at least 2 hours in a given day and you're a salaried employee, you must get paid for 8.
Oh, you're a salaried employee.
Yeah. These are for hourly people, generally speaking. All right.
Hourly people get no break by law.
Yeah, not anymore. Right? Again, those were part of the union contract, right? Now that the unions are not as strong or as powerful, those sorts of clauses are disappearing from the union contract. So is this a good or a bad thing? I don't know, right? Again, that's up to you, right? Is it good that these people get breaks? Is it bad that they're getting paid to do nothing? I don't know. But that's the way it works, all right? So the other thing that unions try to do, and this is again trying to get up to here, right? Because remember, this is the holy grail. They want to get up to the demand side of it, right? They would really like to somehow be able to say, I want there to be more demand for labor. But if you're the union, how do you say that you should hire us when we're going to cost more? I mean,
You're saving money outsourcing.
yeah, something. I mean, there's no monetary way that you can say, hire me because I cost more than people who are not in a union. That's just not going to fly. So what unions have been doing over the last few years has been moving away from things like this, which noticeably look bad. I mean, this is what made unions look wrong, because that's what they were doing. They were forcing higher unemployment. And obviously that's going to piss us off as a workforce, right? So the people who are working are thinking, oh yeah, great, I've got a decent wage perhaps, but it still should be higher. And the people who aren't working are saying, you've got that really high wage, that's why I don't have a job, right? And to some degree, they're absolutely right, right? So what unions try to do, what would unions try and do to increase the demand for the products that unions are making? Well, what do they do? I mean, how does McDonald's make you think that McDonald's is better than Burger King? They advertise. So how do unions advertise? What do they say?
What's a nice
Because they
little
got
song
great
they used to
benefits.
sing? By the union, blah, 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 blah.
Buy union products, right? somehow inflate the demand for these union-made products because that's going to keep you getting better union jobs, higher union wages, better everything, right? And in theory, if you buy union, right, that means they're going to have to hire more people into the union, which means more people are going to work, which means there's going to be... So this whole buy local thing, right, that was actually started by the unions, right? So the unions outsourced the advertising to other people saying, tell people to buy local. Because buy local is basically the same as buy union or buy American. Right? It's the same kind of concept. Once there's a higher demand for American labor because Americans are actually buying Americans' products, that will start pulling the power back to the worker, and the unions can start getting their power back. All right?
And that's who was doing those commercials 25 years ago, American made.
Yeah, that was the first time that unions started to get negative connotations attached to them, was back in the early 80s, mid 80s, right? That's the first time where people started learning you were getting paid to do nothing because you were in a union, right? And who was telling people that? Unions. These union workers are getting paid to do nothing. Who is saying that? He wasn't old enough yet in the 80s, but he was trying. His dad was. Nope, it's not the government. Absolutely not. Corporate America, hell yeah. Because what were they doing? They were having to pay their workers to do nothing, and they're thinking, God, I'm not getting any production out of them. They're being less efficient than they should be. These workers suck. Right? So the corporate America, instead of fighting the unions, what they did is they said, ooh, America, look what the unions are doing to you. They basically played politics with the unions. And the unions, yeah, the unions were not as good at it as the corporate America was, right? That's still true. Unions are... Corporate America is better at being a political entity than the political entity itself is, right? I mean, it's like we should just hire all of the CEOs to be senators and congressmen and presidents, right? I mean,
well, what do they do when they retire? They go sit on a corporate board somewhere and get paid for 2 or 3 meetings a year.
Yeah.
You know, they make more money out of
It's good
office
stuff.
than they did in office.
It's good stuff, right? All right, so anyways, this is what I want you to know from Chapter 10, all right? How the supply and demand for labor adjusts, and how unions, please know these 4 things about unions, about what they do to try and increase wage rates, right? All right.
There isn't any homework.
Not any official homework, but yeah, bonus homework. And I'll even give you an odd one as a bonus. So numbers 2 and 3 in Chapter 10, straight bonus points. So 2 points per question, a possibility of 4 straight. You don't miss anything. You just don't get the bonus points, right? Similarly, if you choose not to do it, you will just not get the opportunity for extra credit.